There's a recording session from October 2023 that almost didn't happen the way it did. Eric Clapton, 78 years old, was in a Los Angeles studio recording his final album before permanent retirement. His arthritis had progressed to the point where playing guitar caused constant pain. Some days his fingers wouldn't cooperate at all. On this particular day, he was recording a song he'd written called The Last Blues, a slow, melancholic piece about aging, memory, and letting go. The first take was rough. His fingers fumbled transitions, notes came out unclear, timing hesitated. The producer stopped the recording. "Eric, that was emotionally powerful, but technically, we should do another take. Or we can fix it digitally. Auto-tune, timing correction, pitch adjustment, make it sound clean." Clapton sat quietly, looking at his hands, these hands that had played thousands of perfect performances. "Mark," Clapton said finally, "how old am I?" 78. "And how long have I been playing guitar?" 60 years, more. "And in those 60 years, I've spent how much time trying to sound perfect?" "Your whole career." "Exactly. And now you're suggesting I hide the truth one more time, that I pretend my hands work the way they used to." Clapton looked at his hands again. "These hands hurt. They don't work right anymore. And that's what you hear in that take. If we auto-tune it, we erase that truth. We make it sound like I'm still the guitarist I was 40 years ago. I'm not. I'm 78. And I want my final recording to sound exactly like what it is, an old man who can barely play anymore, trying one last time to express something real. October 12, 2023, Sunset Sound Studios, Los Angeles. Eric Clapton had been coming to this studio on and off for 4 decades. He'd recorded some of his most successful albums here. The studio walls held memories of thousands of perfect takes, brilliant performances, technically flawless recordings. But today felt different. Today felt final. Clapton was 78 years old. His arthritis had been worsening for years. What had started as occasional stiffness and discomfort in his 50s had progressed to constant pain in his 70s. His fingers were swollen, his joints ached. The dexterity that had made him one of the greatest guitarists alive was disappearing. He could still play, but not like he used to, not with the speed, the precision, the technical mastery that had defined his career. Now, playing guitar meant accepting limitations, accepting imperfection, accepting that his body couldn't do what his mind remembered. This album, his final album, would be called The Last Blues. 12 songs about aging, memory, loss, acceptance, and letting go. Songs written by a man who knew he was at the end of something. The producer was Mark Daniels, a 52-year-old engineer who'd worked with Clapton on 3 previous albums. Mark was talented, professional, and accustomed to modern recording techniques. He knew every trick to make recordings sound perfect. Digital correction, auto-tune, timing adjustments, pitch manipulation. In 2023, almost every commercial recording used these tools. Perfection was expected. The song they were recording that afternoon was the album's title track, The Last Blues. Clapton had written it over several months, working through lyrics about what it meant to be old, to feel your abilities fading, to know you're approaching the end. The first take started at 2:47 p.m. Clapton sat on a stool, acoustic guitar in his hands. He began playing. The opening chords came out hesitant. His left hand struggled to form the shapes. His right hand's strumming pattern wavered. He began singing. His voice aged but still strong, carrying the weight of 60 years of performing. But the guitar part was struggling. Notes came out unclear. His fingers fumbled a transition from one chord to another. The timing hesitated, not for artistic effect, but because his hands couldn't move as quickly as the song required.
A run that would have been effortless 30 years ago came out muddy, imprecise. Mark stopped the recording at the 2-minute mark. "Eric, let's pause there." Clapton stopped playing. He knew what was coming. That was emotionally powerful. The vocal performance is beautiful. The feeling is there. But technically, the guitar part, we need to address it. Your hands are fighting you. "I know. We can do another take, or, and I think this is the better option, we can fix this take digitally. Auto-tune for the slightly off-pitch moments, timing correction for the hesitations. We can clean up the chord transitions, make it sound tight, professional. Nobody will know your hands aren't cooperating." Clapton sat quietly for a long moment, holding his guitar, looking down at his hands. These hands, these famous hands, these hands that had played Layla, that had played Tears in Heaven, that had played thousands of concerts for millions of people, that had defined the sound of blues rock guitar for multiple generations. And now these hands hurt. They were stiff, swollen. The fingers didn't bend the way they should. The strength was diminished. The precision was gone. Clapton said finally, his voice quiet but firm, "Mark, how old am I?" Mark looked confused by the question. 78. "And how long have I been playing guitar?" 60 years, more probably. "And in those 60 years, I've spent how much time trying to sound perfect?" "Your whole career."
Exactly. My whole career trying to sound perfect, trying to hide mistakes, trying to be Eric Clapton, guitar god, technical master, trying to prove I was worth listening to." Clapton looked up at Mark. "And now, at 78, with my hands failing, with this being my last recording, you're suggesting I hide the truth one more time? That I use technology to pretend my hands work the way they used to? I'm suggesting we make the recording the best it can be. No, you're suggesting we make it a lie." Mark started to respond, but Clapton continued. "The best this recording can be is honest, real, true to who I am now, not who I was, who I am." Clapton looked at his hands again, turning them over, examining them. The knuckles were enlarged from arthritis. The veins stood out prominently. Age spots dotted the skin. These were old hands, hands that had lived. "These hands hurt, Mark, every day. They don't work right anymore. I can't form chords as quickly as I could. I can't play runs cleanly. My timing isn't what it was because my body doesn't respond the way it used to. And that's what you hear in that take. Every fumbled note is real. Every hesitation is because I'm old and tired and my body is failing. And that's the truth." "But Eric, if we auto-tune it, if we digitally fix it, what are we doing? We're erasing reality. We're taking away the truth of what it sounds like to be 78 and trying to play guitar with arthritic hands. We're pretending I'm still the guitarist I was 40 years ago. And I'm not. I'm 78, and I want my final recording to sound exactly like what it is, an old man who can barely play anymore, trying one last time to express something real." Mark was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're sure? Because once we release this unedited, people will hear every mistake. Critics will focus on the technical flaws. They'll say your hands are shot, you should have retired years ago. This recording is painful to listen to." Clapton smiled slightly. "Let them say all of that, because it's true. My hands are shot. I probably should have retired years ago. This recording is painful because aging is painful. Letting go is painful. Being honest about decline is painful. But it's real, and I'd rather leave behind something real than something perfect." "Most artists want their final album to be their best." Most artists are afraid of being seen as they actually are. They want to be remembered at their peak, young, strong, capable. I understand that impulse. I've felt it for decades, but I'm past that now. I don't want to be remembered as perpetually 35. I want to be remembered as someone who aged, who declined, who lost abilities. Because that's human. That's real. That's what happens to everyone if they live long enough. Clapton paused, collecting his thoughts. Perfect is for young musicians, trying to impress people, trying to prove they belong, trying to establish themselves. I'm 78. I'm past impressing. I'm past proving. I'm into truth now. And the truth is that I can barely play guitar anymore. But I'm trying anyway. And that struggle, that effort despite limitation, that's what I want people to hear. Mark looked at the recording equipment, then back at Clapton. This goes against everything I've been trained to do as a producer. My job is to make artists sound their best. Your job, Clapton said gently, is to help me make the recording I want to make. And I want to make an honest one. They did 3 more takes that afternoon. Each was imperfect in different ways. Each contained mistakes, hesitations, moments where Clapton's hands betrayed his intentions. After the 4th take, Clapton said, "That one, the first one, that's what we release." The first take has the most mistakes. The first take has the most truth. I hadn't compensated yet, hadn't adjusted my playing to hide the limitations. It's the rawest, most honest version. That's the one I want. Over the following weeks, they recorded the rest of the album. Mark repeatedly offered to digitally enhance the recordings. Clapton repeatedly refused. Let people hear what 78 sounds like. Let them hear aging. Let them hear limitation, because that's real. And real is more important than perfect. The album, The Last Blues, was released in December 2023. The critical response was divided. Some reviewers were harsh. Clapton's hands are no longer capable of executing what his mind intends, wrote one major publication. The album is technically his weakest, filled with fumbled notes and imprecise playing. It's difficult to listen to a legend struggle. Others understood what Clapton was doing. This is the most honest recording Clapton has ever released, wrote another critic. He's not hiding his age. He's not pretending his body still works the way it did. He's showing us what it means to be an artist at the end of a long career. The imperfections aren't flaws, they're the point. Fans were similarly divided. Younger listeners, accustomed to digitally perfect recordings, found the album hard to listen to. It sounds unfinished, many commented, like rough demos that should have been polished. But older listeners, especially those who'd followed Clapton for decades, understood. They heard themselves in the album. They heard their own aging, their own declining abilities, their own struggle to do what once came easily.
"This album sounds like my hands feel when I try to play guitar," wrote one 70-year-old fan. "Like my voice sounds when I try to sing. Like my body feels when I try to do what I used to do without thinking." Clapton isn't hiding anymore. He's showing us what we all become if we're lucky enough to live this long. In January 2024, Clapton gave what would be his final interview. The journalist asked about the decision to release the album without digital correction. "It was the most important artistic decision I've made," Clapton said, "because it was about honesty versus vanity, about truth versus image, about accepting who I am now versus clinging to who I was." Some critics called it your worst album technically. They're right, it is my worst album technically. My hands don't work. I can't play like I could. That's factually true. But it's also my most honest album, my most real album, and given the choice between technically perfect but dishonest and technically flawed but real, I chose real. Every time. At 78, that's the only choice that matters. Do you regret not fixing the mistakes? No, because they're not mistakes, they're truth. A mistake is when you intend to play something one way and it comes out wrong by accident. What you hear on that album isn't accidental, it's intentional truth. My hands hurt, they don't work right. That's not a mistake, that's my reality. And I chose to document my reality, not hide it. What do you want people to take away from this album? Clapton thought for a long moment. I want them to understand that perfection isn't the goal, never was. Perfection is a lie we tell ourselves to feel in control, but we're not in control. We age, we decline, we lose what made us special. That happens to everyone, and we can either hide that decline, use technology, use tricks, pretend we're still young, or we can accept it, show it, be honest about it. He paused. I spent 60 years trying to sound perfect, trying to hide every flaw, trying to be Eric Clapton, guitar god. And now, at the end, I finally understand. The flaws were always more interesting than the perfection. The struggle was always more human than the mastery. And honesty is always more valuable than polish. So you're saying artists should embrace their limitations? I'm saying artists should embrace their truth, whatever that truth is. For me, at 78, the truth is that I can barely play guitar anymore. That's painful to admit, but it's real. And real is what endures. Perfect recordings get forgotten, but honest recordings, recordings that capture the truth of a moment, even when that truth is difficult, those recordings matter. Those recordings last.
Today, The Last Blues remains Eric Clapton's final album. He announced his permanent retirement from music in March 2024, citing the physical pain of playing and his desire to leave while there's still truth to tell, not after the truth has been completely erased by decline. The album continues to be debated. Music schools use it to discuss artistic choices, technical standards, and the role of perfection in recorded music. Some argue Clapton did his legacy a disservice by releasing technically flawed work. Others argue he elevated his legacy by choosing honesty over vanity. Mark Daniels, the producer, was interviewed in 2024 about the recording sessions. "It was the hardest album I've ever produced," Mark said, "not because the music was technically difficult, but because every instinct I had as a producer, every training, every standard I'd been taught, told me to fix the mistakes, to make it sound better, to protect Eric's legacy by hiding his decline. But he wouldn't let you." "No, and I didn't understand why at first, but I understand now. He was teaching me something. Teaching all of us something, that our job isn't to create perfection. Our job is to capture truth. And sometimes truth sounds imperfect. Sometimes truth sounds painful. Sometimes truth sounds like an old man with arthritic hands, struggling to play a guitar one last time. But that's more valuable than any perfect performance could ever be." Do you think he was right to release it unedited? I think he was brave to release it unedited. Most artists, most people, spend their entire lives hiding their decline, hiding their limitations, pretending they're still who they were at their peak. Eric chose to show his decline, to document his limitations, to say, "This is who I am now, not who I was, who I am." That takes more courage than any perfect performance ever did. There's a quote from Clapton that's carved into a wall at Sunset Sound Studios now, in the room where The Last Blues was recorded. "Perfect is for the young who still have something to prove. Real is for the old who've learned that proof doesn't matter. Truth matters, and truth is never perfect." For 60 years, Eric Clapton pursued perfection, technical mastery, flawless performances, the ability to play anything, anytime, perfectly. And in his final recording, he abandoned perfection entirely. He chose imperfection, chose limitation, chose honesty. He let people hear what 78 sounds like, what arthritis sounds like, what the end of a great career sounds like. Not because he wanted sympathy, but because he wanted truth. And truth, even when it fumbles, even when it hesitates, even when it can barely play anymore, truth is what endures. The perfect recordings get forgotten, but the honest ones, the ones that show us what it means to be human, to age,
to decline, to keep trying even when you can barely do it anymore. Those recordings matter. Eric Clapton's final album wasn't his best, but it was his truest. And in the end, true beats perfect every single time.